Okay, so we're all ready to go?
Great, thank you, Amanda. So I will go ahead and call to order the June 25th, 2020, sorry, June 15th, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting at 6:31 and acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. I see that Councillors Baxter, Jansen, Kobayashi, Parkinson, and Mayor Martin are attending, and the Councillor Day sends her regrets as she's not feeling well tonight. Under approval of the agenda, I'm looking for a recommendation that the near-term and long-term agendas be received and that the agenda of the June 15th, 2020 Committee of the Whole be amended or adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Not seeing any. Those that are opposed? Councillor Parkinson, did you have a question?
I did, Councillor Logan. Just I'm wondering about the DCC report that's proposed to go to council before it goes to the Finance and Governments Committee. I'm wondering if that's been sorted out, what's going to happen with that.
I wonder if our CAO is, oh, Robert, perfect. Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Chair Logan. We will endeavor to get that report on the July 13th Finance and Governance meeting, and so it will likely be struck from the council meeting previous.
Thank you. One other thing, if I may, and again, I don't know, this is probably depends how others feel about it, but public hearings coming up. We have a few public hearings coming up. I think that the first couple are probably not going to have much input. I don't know about the public hearing for the OCP and rezoning for Latoria South. And I just wonder how everybody feels about doing that one by Zoom as opposed to in person. So.
Thank you. I don't think now is an appropriate time to have that conversation, whether we have it in person or, but I do take your point. With that, we do have a motion on the floor, so I will call the question. Those opposed? Seeing none opposed, the motion passes. There's one set of minutes for from June 1st, Committee of the Whole, looking for a motion to adopt, and moved by Councillor Jansen. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Councillor Jansen, or did I just not lower your hand? Nope. I'll call the question. All those opposed? Seeing none opposed, the motion passes. There are no members of the public that have registered to speak. We, however, did receive one written submission regarding the Royal Bay residents who do not support the views of the Royal Bay Homeowners Association. The email has been attached to the agenda and provided to the committee ahead of time. So with that, we will jump right into new business. 5.1, Royal Bay Latoria South Road Design Standards. And I'd love to invite Aaron Knutson, our intermediate engineering technologist, to introduce the item. Aaron, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair Logan. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so I will be presenting the Royal Bay Latoria South Design Standards, and can everyone hear me well? Yep, thumbs up, perfect. Okay, I guess I will go and share my screen. It's having a little technical difficulty. It seems to want to move to my second slide. Okay. All right. Yes, so I'll be presenting the Royal Bay Latoria South Design Standards. Myself and Brent Molnar will be available for questions after the presentation. So I will get started. All right, the developer of Royal Bay Lands is proposing specific design standards for the road design and street lighting, which will be applied to the internal road network of the Latoria South lands. The location of the lands that we're speaking about tonight can be seen here in slide 2, which is outlined in the red dashed line here. The subject lands are sort of separated into 2 large areas at the moment, referred to as the Commons area and the Quarry. The Commons is intended to have attached dwellings, apartments, commercial units, and urban park space, whereas the Quarry will have single-family dwellings, attached dwellings, apartments, non-residential units such as elementary school and open park space. The current roadway standards as specified in bylaw number 285 are out of date and are not represented by the city's current intent and vision, which is to have well-connected pedestrian corridors, bike routes that consider connectivity and encourage mobility choices, and reduce vehicle speeds through design. The report's been broken into subsections. Road design standards for the local roads, collector roads, and arterial roads, local road speed limits, as well as street lighting standards. Staff is seeking a resolution to establish specific design standards for Royal Bay Latoria South through an amendment to the Subdivision and Development Bylaw 285, as well as a speed reduction for local roads by amending the Speed Regulation Bylaw 1612. Staff is recommending that the report titled Royal Bay Latoria South Design Standards be received, and that committee consider recommending to council that the road design standards and street lighting standards proposed in the June 15, 2020 staff report titled Royal Bay Latoria South Design Standards be accepted as the road and lighting standards within the Royal Bay Latoria South development lands. And that Colwood Subdivision and Development of Land Bylaw 1995, Bylaw 285, be amended to add specific design standards for Royal Bay Latoria South lands. And further that the Colwood Speed Regulation Bylaws number 1612 be amended to reduce the posted speed limit for local roads within Royal Bay Latoria South lands from 50 kilometers an hour to 40 kilometers an hour. All right, next we move on to sort of the road network and connectivity. First, developers proposing specific road design standards to enable Royal Bay and the Southlands. Sorry, let me start that again. The developers proposing specific road design standards to enable the Royal Bay North and Southlands to have similar look and feel. To modernize the road standards, introducing more multi-use pathways, and lengthening and expanding parking areas within residential and commercial areas. Considerations for a bylaw amendment for the road design standards are regarding sidewalks, multi-use pathways, road widths, and parking areas. In this slide here, you can see the sort of preliminary road layout at the moment. Just please understand it is preliminary and it's for information only at this point. But you can see the local roads are shown in yellow. The collector roads are shown in green. And there's a commercial collector road, which has sort of been named Commons Road at the moment. As well, the existing arterial roads, which are Latoria Boulevard, are shown in gray, and Machosen Road is shown in gray. And then you can see some of the sort of connections that we're looking for pathways and multi-use pathways. Starting with local roads, Table 1 compares the required works by bylaw number 285 to the works proposed by the developer. Some of the key elements to discuss would be a small reduction in the right-of-way width from 20 meters to 18 meters. Concrete sidewalks are proposed for 2 sides on the main local road, which comes from, if I go back up to my slide here, the main local road we're referring to is this one here, this sort of central spine here that comes from, which is a roundabout. This green circle here is a roundabout that's proposed. So this is the main local, and then these would be the limited locals that I'd be referring to here. So the sidewalks are proposed for 2 sides on that main local road at 1.5 meters wide. And then for the limited local roads, it would go down to a 2-meter sidewalk on one side. The other thing to sort of bring attention to would be, you know, we're going to get boulevard trees, which is great. Our bylaw doesn't actually call for them. And as well, same with irrigation for those trees. Another item about the right-of-way width is we're also going to sort of allow some consideration for a further reduction of the limited local roads to 17 meters. And that would be at the Director of Engineering's discretion, provided that they can provide a design that shows there would be no conflicts with any of the utilities. And that's basically just to sort of narrow that right-of-way width, try and reduce speeds and such like that. We got, I guess I get another large difference is the parking that's being proposed for the local roads. The bylaw typically just asks for one sort of wide width of asphalt, which allows for 2 travel lanes at 3.5 meters and then a parking lane at about 2.5 meters only on one side. In this case, we are the developers proposing to do parking lanes on both sides of the local road, just to maximize opportunity for parking in the residential areas. So here we have the cross sections from the bylaw, as well as the proposed cross section for the local roads. You can sort of see what I was speaking about is we got these parking lanes here on the proposed local road. So parking on both sides. We've got the 1.5 meter sidewalks on both sides. And then for the limited local, you would only have the one side as a 2-meter sidewalk. And then we come to the local road cross section from the TNP. And you can see that there's sidewalks on both sides at 2 meters is what it calls for. As well, there's a 6.5 meter wide roadway and 2.5 meter buffers. Now the buffers sort of could imply that we could do parking on both sides, I guess. But they wouldn't be necessarily you know, paved, or it could be a shoulder. So okay, moving on to collector roads. Table 2 shows the proposed works largely meets or exceeds Colwood's bylaw. They are actually proposing a 3.5 meter wide multi-use pathway on both sides of the road in place of the standard sidewalk and bike lanes. The multi-use pathways would consist of 1.8 meter wide walkway and a single direction 1.7 meter bike. So it'd be single direction, just to kind of remove some of those conflicts that can arise when you've got two bi-directional bikeways on the same side of the road. The use of the multi-use pathways is supported by the Transportation Master Plan, which speaks to multi-use pathways separated from streets to encourage pedestrian and cycle activity and provide mobility choices. The lane widths would increase from 3.3 meters standard to 3.5 meters at intersections to allow for BC Transit bus movements. As well, there would be roadside parking bays, which would be concentrated in front of residential and commercial areas. Here we have the collector road sections, the section from the bylaw, as well as the neighborhood collector road that's proposed for Royal Bay. Right off the bat, you can see the sort of designated parking bays again here, which is divided up differently than the bylaw. The bylaw just calls for one wide, 12-meter wide surface. Not necessarily any designated parking bays or bike lanes. What else? And then here you can see the multi-use pathways, the 1.8 meter walkway and the 1.7 meter bikeway, which is separated by boulevard and a curb. And moving on. Table 3 shows the works that are required by bylaw compared to the works proposed for a commercial collector road. And that was what I earlier referred to as Commons Road, which is in the sort of commercial hub of the Commons area. 2-meter sidewalks are proposed on both sides of the road. Roadside dedicated parking is proposed with angled and parallel parking types. The angled parking is intended to provide or maximize parking in front of the storefronts for customer parking. Bikes are intended to share the road surface with the vehicles. The lane width has been increased to 3.5 meters to help accommodate for that. And as well, we would get boulevards with your typical trees, irrigation, and allowances for street furniture. So here we have the collector road again from the bylaw, but the commercial collector road cross section here, showing here's the angled parking, and then we would still have the ability for parallel parking where applicable and where it fits, and then we would have the 2-meter sidewalks on both sides. We've asked for bollards to be provided to ensure that there's no encroachment of those sidewalks from the parked vehicles. And you can see here where we've widened out the lanes just a little bit more, just to help with that shared surface. All right, and then we're on to the collector road from the Transportation Master Plan, and yeah, it's obviously very different from the commercial proposal with the buffered bike lanes. But you get the 2-meter sidewalks on both sides, and we will have boulevards. The reason for developing the specific road standard for the commercial was really to provide an ability to close off a section of the road to host public events, like an outdoor market. So we were looking at sort of like a Woonerf type feel. So we tried to remove a lot of those types of conflicts and enable us to close off a nice wide asphalt surface, or I think there's even going to be some brick implemented into the design So that's the reason for the special case for the cross-section for the commercial. Then we're moving on to table 4, where we're comparing the works for an arterial road required by bylaw versus the proposed works for a 2-lane section. You can see that the proposed works either meets or exceeds the bylaw requirements. I would say the one item that's largely different is the right-of-way width. You can see typically we require 25-meter right-of-way for, oh, I'm sorry. Not sure how that happened. A 25-meter right-of-way for arterial roads typically, and we're sort of, sorry, the developer's proposing a 20-meter right-of-way in this case. Now, we have sidewalks on both sides in both cases. They're proposing bike lanes for the arterial road, where our bylaw again just shows a very wide section of asphalt, doesn't have any dedicated bike lanes. And again, you get your boulevard trees and irrigation. And here are the cross sections for the arterial roads for the 2-lane. Here's the bylaw cross section, and that's where I was speaking to, is the 14-meter wide asphalt surface. Not much delineation there. Whereas here we're going to have 2 3.3-meter lanes, the 2.5-meter buffered bike lane. So that's 1.8 meters of bike lane with a 0.7 buffer. And then you get your 2-meter sidewalks on both sides, boulevards with trees. And table 5, we are now comparing the required works for an arterial road versus the proposed arterial road for a 5-lane cross section. So this is basically Latoria Boulevard. We're going again for the right-of-way width, 25 meters typical, and now we're increasing it to 27.5 meters to fit those 5 lanes. Again, we're looking at multi-use pathways, so there's not a specific sidewalk, but there will be, again, the 1.8 meter walkway and the 1.7 meter bikeway. We'll have a center median, which will also act as a center turn lane where necessary. The center median will have trees and mostly grass and a little bit of hard surfacing. And here are the cross sections for the 5-lane proposed cross section. So you've got the typical 5-lane up here with the 2 travel lanes on both sides with the center median / left turn lane and the multi-use. The bottom image here is actually showing where we're going to be having a transit exchange now, which provides a 6-meter corridor for the bus bay, as well as the bus shelter and what have you, and still allows for the multi-use to go behind the shelter. This road right-of-way will have to increase to 35.5 meters, but it's only for that localized section. It's not going to be a continuous 35.5 meters. All right, moving on to the arterial road as represented in the TMP. The 2-lane arterial above is very much like the collector road, really no difference. The bottom image here is our sort of standard 5-lane cross section. And the big difference being the outside lanes are shown as 3.1 meters. And that was because they could sort of borrow some of this space for the bike lane buffers. And in Royal Bay's case, we're not going to be having these buffered bike lanes, so we don't have those buffers. So we're bumping that up to 3.3 meters for that reason. As well, we're also increasing the 3 meter center median to 3.3 meters. And that's just to help with safety for turning movements and stuff for the center turn lane. Here we're now discussing the proposed changes to the speed limit on the local roads. The developer as well as staff are proposing a reduction of the local roads from the standard 50 kilometers an hour, which is specified in the Colwood bylaw number 285, to 40 kilometers an hour for the through local roads. So that would be the main local, as well as the limited locals and the cul-de-sacs. They would all be 40 kilometers an hour. Now they would have to be signed as 40 kilometers an hour. As well, we would require a bylaw amendment, as I said, to I believe it's bylaw number 1612, to change the standard specified speed limit for local roads within the Royal Bay lands specific. In discussions with staff, we've come to the understanding that other municipalities in Victoria and Saanich are considering or have already implemented some changes to reduce speed limits within neighborhood local roads to 40 kilometers an hour and even 30 kilometers an hour in some cases. We're supporting the proposal to change the speed limits to help with reducing speeds within the neighborhoods and to sort of balance out the speed of the vehicle and the cyclist, so there's less conflict. As well, it would help with pedestrians crossing the road and such. I think that's it for the speed limit changes. Oh, I guess I could say that they're not looking for any reductions to the speed limits for the collector roads or the arterial roads that are surrounding the lands. Now we're moving on to the street lighting. Royal Bay actually has been using Lumic LED street lighting on the Northlands for some time now. They were accepted through the design standards approval for the Southlands, or sorry, I should say the Northlands. However, the lighting standards were never formally inserted into a bylaw. So we would like to take, the staff would like to take this opportunity to include the lighting standards now in with the Royal Bay Latoria South standards. The color of the poles will be the black blue that has been used already in the Northlands and throughout Colwood. The difference being is you can see here, this is our standard cyclone side mount light, Park Avenue, which is not shown in the correct color, unfortunately. I didn't have a good picture of it. But it would be black blue, and Royal Bay uses sort of a gooseneck sort of style, but a very very similar head to ours, and they'd both be LED, downcast, dark sky compliant, and all that stuff. So staff can make the following conclusions from the proposed design standards. The proposed road design standards largely meet Colwood's intent for the transportation master plan, as well as the official community plan, by providing safer sidewalks with multi-use pathways, improved pedestrian and cycling connectivity, as well as providing different mobility choices for the community. The design standards would be specific to Royal Bay Latoria Southlands and would be added to the bylaw as an appendix or a schedule. The intent to provide increased roadside parking has been provided in residential neighborhoods and commercial and institutional areas to address the parking demands, as well as the public sort of outcry, if you want to say, for the parking issues that are being experienced in the Northlands with Ryder Hedgedal and such. The proposed Lumic LED street lighting exceed Colwood's bylaw and meets the OCP initiative for dark sky compliance. Given that the developer's proposal follows the intent of bylaw number 285, as well as the intent of the Transformation Master Plan and the official community plan, staff is in support of the proposed road design standards and street lining standards for the Royal Bay Latoria Southlands. So in closing, I'd just like to repeat the sort of options and alternatives available to us. We're looking for direct staff to approve the proposed road design standards and street lighting standards as provided in Appendix A, Royal Bay Latoria South Design Standards, and direct staff to draft an amendment to Colwood Subdivision and Development of Land Bylaw 1995, bylaw number 285, and as amended, by adding the specific design standards for the Royal Bay Latoria Southlands to the bylaw as an appendix or schedule, and direct staff to draft an amendment to Colwood Speed Regulation Bylaw number 1612 by reducing the speed limit for local roads within the Royal Bay Latoria Southlands from 50 kilometers an hour to 40 kilometers an hour, specific to the Royal Bay Latoria Southlands. Or alternatively, the proposed road design standards and lighting standards not be accepted as the road design standards within the Royal Bay Latoria South development lands, and the Transportation Master Plan be applied as the road design standards. And direct staff to maintain the 50 kilometer an hour speed limit specified in the Speed Regulation Bylaw number 1612 for the local roads within Royal Bay Southlands. And that's my presentation. So thank you, Your Worship, and all committee members. Thank you for your time. I'd like to point out that we actually have Ben Mycroft, Lance Fleur from Gablecraft, Matt Pike from On Point, and Dan Huang from Urban Systems, who are all available on the call for questions. If there's any questions at this time.
That's great. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Aaron.
thank you.
Well-written report, and appreciate the slideshow. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will go right to committee for discussion. Councillor Jansen, you're first out of the box.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for a very detailed report and presentation in a fashion that non-engineering types like myself can understand. I do have a list of questions here. I think most of them are small details. First, I'll start off by moving the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Jansen.
1 through 3. However, I am going to offer a slight amendment at the end of my diatribe here, Mr. Chair. But a few small questions in no particular order. I have concerns about the, and this is part and parcel to, I'm chewing on suggesting an amendment. I firmly believe that 40 kilometers an hour within a cul-de-sac to be at the higher end of the spectrum. If we say 40, people are going to do 50. If we say 30, hopefully they'll be somewhere close to 40. I'm a bit of a pessimist in this regard, but I'll maybe circle back to that, Mr. Chair. The Latoria Road design that was laid out there, where does that start? I take it it's from sort of the corner of the property onwards up to the proposed roundabout. We're not talking about chewing up the bottom half that's already been designed and built.
Question, Aaron?
Yes, thank you. The proposed 5-lane section is intended to start at Metchosin and potentially carry through all the way to VMP. Yes, there will have to be some removal of some of the existing works along Latoria Boulevard to accomplish this. Mostly we're looking at the parking bays that are there now will have to be stripped back to allow for those outside lanes. The median space is largely there now. And then as for the bus exchange, that's a whole nother ballgame. There will be some encroachment into Meadow Park, which will have to be captured as, like a localized road dedication there. And then as well as some lands on the south side of Latoria.
Okay, thanks. That's great, because part of my next question was gonna be, how do we integrate all this if the design is slightly different? And I take it this is really just proposed because we don't have a clear understanding of what's going to happen further along Latoria Road as of yet. The ever fabled scallops along Ryder Hesdall Way. I think there's opportunities there that were missed to sort of extract some more parking. And instead what we got was some labor intensive boulevard for our public works staff. So I would hope, and of course we can't see from these kind of cutaway diagrams, but I would hope that we minimize these scallops in favor of being able to put some more cars along the roadway. It sounded like you had turned your mind to this, Aaron.
Aaron?
Yeah, I'll pass this off to Brent. He just wanted to say a few comments about this.
Thank you, Brent.
Through the chair, thanks very much for the question, Councillor Jensen. Yeah, the scallops that were installed in the north area, complete with some of the boulevard treatments, were actually embedded in the zone requirements for it. And so we did learn from that. And what we've looked to do is elongate all of those parking scallops. It still will provide planting opportunities, but it should create more parking opportunities, most importantly.
So I see the scallops being useful as we approach an intersection or a crosswalk, or even perhaps for something like a fire hydrant, but pushing in a scallop and putting a curb in and losing a few parking opportunities in favor of something like some of those planters on the Ryder Hesdall really just created work for public works and fewer parking opportunities. So, sorry, that's a comment, not a question, Brent.
Sorry, Councillor Jansen, I see that Ben Mycroft has his hand up. He might be able to answer.
Sounds great.
Ben?
Yes, thanks, Chair Logan. I just wanted to, I guess, make a comment in response to Dean, Councillor Jansen's comment and question around the planters. And, we've heard from the public clearly that the maintenance on those has been challenging. And so what we've done is on the south side, on the Ryder extension, we've actually converted all of what would have been planters over to parking. So now we've got parking on both sides instead of just on the one side, which I think is contributing to the parking issue there in front of the school. And so we're just trying to maximize all our parking opportunities now.
I saw that in some of the diagrams, and I think that even if it ends up being overbuilt for a number of years, I think that will pay dividends into the future when we are attracting more commerce down to that area.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we've got through the commons. We've got this section all wrapping through the commons roads, and that's to allow for significant on-street parking opportunities, basically to be sort of surge parking capacity for some of the off-street parking. In case there's any worries, it's just having a lot of parking just in that commercial area. It seemed to be important.
That's great. I appreciate that. Now this next bit, I'm not sure who we throw this at, Chair Logan, but I start to get concerned when we're reducing the widths down to, I see 17 meters, and I'll tell you my concern. Councillor Logan and I were walking just last night down in the Caspian area, enjoying the neighborhood. It was replete with children and pets and people walking, and it was a lovely evening with no wind. What we found or encountered was parking on both sides of the road, which is great. However, my concern, if we get down to as wide as 17 meters with parking on both sides of the road, I'm going to bet that we would have a tough time navigating a piece of fire apparatus, especially the tower truck through that confined space. And then the other piece is, as we get narrower, visibility for drivers becomes restricted. And I think it's more a cautionary note than anything else, because I do like all of these proposals. But I think maybe that's a message for Brent. I think when we're getting down to 17 meters, we're getting fairly narrow.
Thanks, Councillor Jansen. I see both Brent and Matt Pike wish to speak. So Brent, did you want to go first?
Thank you very much. And through the chair, Councillor Jensen, thanks for your concern. Road standards and local roads have been reduced in other areas to lower than 17, but regardless, your concern is definitely noted. And one of the factors that we do at intersections is make sure that we don't have situations too tight. Plus, we run through all of the lanes, intersections, cul-de-sacs with our fire truck turning movements to demonstrate that they can be made. And as we go forward and we continue to develop not only the works, but the cross sections as they're applied, that's exactly what the consulting engineer will be providing. And we'll take that to Fire Chief Cassidy for his comment and query as well.
I got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, did you want to add a few comments?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Logan. Just to reinforce Brent's position, and with that 17 metres versus the 18, that would really be only on those local, very small roads with the cul-de-sacs, for instance, whether that be a 40 kilometre or a 50. Very importantly, the actual road travelway doesn't change a great deal. It's just we find that extra metre from the reduction of the sidewalk on two sides down to one. I think it's important to realise actually over in on the north side of Latoria, I think some of the local roads you're referring to, Councillor Jansen, interestingly enough, the local road section over there, I think is actually 16.6 metres. So we're actually at 18 and in isolated cases going down to 17 and do concur that there are times when it can be problematic, particularly parking on both sides. But I would suggest it's obviously I think acceptable, but of course that's our council's direction decision.
Yeah, that sounds great, and it sounds like everybody's putting some thought into this, which is great. I'll wrap up in just a sec, Councillor Logan, but I do like what I've heard in the sense that we've picked up a few tips and tricks from the north side that we'll incorporate in the south side. But outside these obvious areas that we would like to improve on, are we looking at pretty much the same design standard, some consistency between the north and the south? I guess Ben or Lance are probably, or Brent are probably best to answer that.
Brent?
Through the chair, there is very much a consistency that's been brought about. Councillor Jensen, you've noted the major differences, which will be in those parking scallops and frequency of those scallops. However, we do believe that we've maintained a similar sort of landscape approach, which is the greatest part of what you'll see about that difference. But otherwise, the road cross sections are essentially the same.
Awesome, thanks. Gord, that's about it. I am going to propose an amendment, if you don't mind, and that would be to reduce the speed limit for the just the third point, which is really the smallest roads, the cul-de-sac roads, to 30 kilometers per hour.
Brent, are you're comfortable with that?
Sure. The
You
cul-de-sacs, I mean, it's certainly so. If what we'll need is to amend the bylaw specific to cul-de-sacs that are terminal, obviously as cul-de-sacs tend to be, but no problem at all. We can do that.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we do have a motion on the floor, the staff recommendation with a slight amendment to reduce the cul-de-sac speed limits to 30. So again, on the motion, Mayor Martin. And I bet you're muted.
Sorry, I'm
There.
sorry, muted. I was pulling a Michael. can you tell me, am I speaking to the amendment or am I speaking to the main motion?
You're speaking to the main motion, which has that amendment incorporated into it.
But we haven't voted on that. Are we just assuming,
So,
are we making,
well,
are-
he moved the original motion, so as chair, I allowed him just to make that small adjustment at the end.
okay, but I would not be supporting that then. So if, and I'll get there. So let's go to staff. I want to talk about the 50 to 40 kilometer an hour change. It's my understanding, because I've dealt a lot with the mayors, especially Mayor Fred Haynes in Saanich, who has been working very hard with the province to try and get Saanich's road standard to drop from 50 to 40. The province has not authorized that at this point. They're looking at doing a trial, but my understanding, part of the reason Saanich is struggling with switching their roads from 50 to 40 is that the provincial regulation does not require that you sign the speed, that it automatically is 50. If we are changing some of these roads to 40, it would be my understanding that we would need to sign each of those roads. Is that correct, Steph?
Through the chair, Mayor Martin, yes, you are correct. The reason why you don't have to sign it is because the Motor Vehicle Act stipulates all roads without signage, unless they're signed differently, to be 50. So that's why
Right.
on highways you see them at being 80. And yes, we would need speed signs at the entrance of each roadway.
So I have several issues about that. So if we are, so who, I guess the first question I have is, who is paying for that signage? Is the city paying for that signage, or is the development paying for that signage?
All works and service, through the chair, Mayor Martin, all works and services associated with the subdivision. So that's every component, including the signs, are built and put up by the developer, after which, when they're agreed to be in place and seated properly, they become the asset of the city. So any replacement to the signs, once they're installed, would be ours, but we wouldn't foresee a replacement for a number of years unless they were subject to graffiti or other.
So I should see a zero financial consequence to us changing the road standard speed from 50 to 40 in this development, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so how is staff planning on addressing the issues of Latoria North that already exist, that are not signed at 40? And so that we're going to end up having one larger development with two different speed zones, depending on what area of the development you're in.
Through the chair, council can direct staff to amend the bylaw for a speed consideration at any time. And we could receive a motion tonight to affect all the roads in the north of a similar manner, or you can direct staff to come back with such a motion. And we would propose the amendment to the bylaw in the same way that this has been tabled tonight.
Okay. My concern with that is that there are several communities within Colwood, for example, the Esquimalt Lagoon area, who have made several requests to the city to lower speed limits on Lagoon, on Milburn, on Heatherbell, down to 40. And part of the rationale of the reason we did not do that was that there was a financial consequence to doing that. And so I'm just concerned about changing some areas within Colwood to mirror that, but not allowing other areas that are suffering the same sort of issues, and for us not to be doing that. I would prefer that we stay consistent throughout the entire city. If we feel like we need to drop road standard speeds in one specific area, I think we should be doing them wherever the community believes that it should occur. So that also means that with this amendment that Councillor Jensen's moved, we would also need to sign the cul-de-sacs down to 30, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I'm all done for now. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. And I would suggest that if you wanted to make an amendment to the main motion, you're free to do so, but I'll leave that up to you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair Logan. I yield my questions because they've all been asked.
Very good. Thank you very much. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be happy to hear that a lot of my questions have been answered as well. But I do have a few left. And here's my thinking. what we see here is a number of really nice pictures of the cross sections, and you know, there's some good work there and some good thought in there. And yet we're trying to make a movie in my estimation. You know, we're looking at movement for people, for cars, and for bikes all throughout here. Must admit, I'm not a big fan of these multi-use pathways paralleling roads where we have bikers and pedestrians sort of in close proximity. I understand others prefer that to bikers and cars being in close proximity. So, you know, we're not going to resolve that tonight. We have some good cross sections. I guess I guess here's my thinking is, who's in charge here to look at all the modes of transport and make sure they're all working correctly? And if in fact we, you know, with some further work and as you get more into the details of the subdivision, you realize that perhaps a road should have shared bike lanes instead of a multi-use pathway or something like that, just for the efficiency of movement of, say, commuter cyclists versus other things. Who orchestrates that and who makes the changes on the fly as we go along? I don't think we want to put the developer, their consultants through coming back through a big process at council if in fact they decide on, you know, for instance, the Latoria Boulevard. After some thought and some more consideration, they may decide that bike lanes are better placed buffered on the road than on next to the sidewalks or something like that. So as I said, what we've seen here tonight is all good work, but I suspect it might be improved upon when they get into the details. And how do we do that? How do we provide flexibility to the designers and our staff to improve it when there's an opportunity to improve it?
Good question. Brent?
Thanks very much for the question. And through the chair, Councillor Parkinson, that role of decision would ultimately fall to the Director of Engineering. And the reason for the bylaw amendment today is to table the amendment. So the standards in their absolute form, just as though it would be in a bylaw. So these standards are intended to be included as an appendix, essentially, to our existing bylaw. And once they are, then they become the standard. To amend that standard on the fly would be, if it was amending to not achieve the goal, would be a consideration back to council. To amend it to still achieve the goal would fall to the director to make it work. So ultimately, it would be my intention, if there was a bike lane supposed to be on the roadway, that the bike lane was realized. What we may see is some fluctuating in the boulevard space to enable that to happen, but the intention of pedestrian connectivity, the intention of cycling connectivity, the intention of road connectivity, all form within that realm. In regards to the desire to change, these lines that you've seen on the map are actually part of a 4.5-month exercise in working not only with the engineers and the consultants at On Points, but it started actually as a planning exercise to go through how we were grossly looking at the connectivity for all the modes onto the land. And then once we had those connectivity goals in place at a planning scale, moved into the civil engineering world to bring them down to reality. So the shortest answer to your question is that would fall to the Director of Engineering. We would meet the intent of a bike lane at 1.8 as shown, as a sidewalk as 2.0, for example, is shown. But if the boulevard had to be reduced from, let's say, 2 to 1.8 or 1.5 to make that happen, the functions of connectivity would hold first, and we'd be able to do those minor modifications on the fly. To delete an object like a bike lane, or even move it, as you've indicated, on Latoria Boulevard from a multi-use out onto the road, that is significant enough of a change to the standard that will come back to council.
Okay.
That's too bad. I was all on side till that last statement, but okay, so it is. I guess, you know, I just raised my concerns about. I think we're going to see an increase in commuter cycling in the years to come, and I worry about proximity to commuter cyclists and recreational cyclists like myself to pedestrians on sidewalks. But you know that, and you're capable of working through it. So I'll leave that subject. My next subject is irrigation. And I see you're talking about city irrigation systems in the boulevards. And I'm wondering whether that's a temporary irrigation system for trees to get started, a permanent irrigation for trees, or a permanent irrigation for for grass in the boulevards, and what estimates of manpower and cost have we done for any city irrigation within Latoria South?
Yeah. Brent?
So through the chair, thanks for the question, Councillor Parkinson. This is part of our learning works that we've done actually from the north area, and it came part with some of the CRD water restrictions. When the private property owner extends their private irrigation system out into the municipal boulevard, for one, we lack as-built. For two, when we're on water restrictions, off goes the water. And what we found out is that they were being installed as an overspray system. And then our trees suffered health, and the developer is bonding for the trees. So coming back to Mayor Martin's question about the cost to install are all 100% borne by the developer. The cost to maintain after that is the city's. And once we noticed a bit of tree health issues, the need to separate the irrigation systems came forward. We don't mind turning off our irrigation system to allow the grass to grow, to green out, but not to compromise the tree health. And so that's the intention for that system being installed. But we would certainly keep it for the establishment period, about 2.5 years. And then if the tree was looking healthy and could survive without it, we would certainly turn that off as well. Now I've got Gord, our parks foreman, our manager, sitting beside me as well. And Gord, have you got anything to add?
No, you pretty much covered it right there, Brent. The trees, you have to have the tree irrigation, especially in the kind of droughts that we've been having. Grass is one thing, we can always turn grass off like Brent says, but trees, and just to have that irrigation system there, if there's ever a problem, once a tree gets established, it definitely can take care of itself. But during drought situations, we definitely need tree irrigation.
Thanks, Gord.
So I'm understanding that a temporary irrigation system for trees, but the city would install a permanent irrigation system for the boulevards. Is that what I'm hearing?
So through the chair, a temporary system or permanent system all requires a water meter. At the time of install, and I'm not trying to push everything off the developer, they're probably cringing on me here, but they would install the meter, they would design the system, and they would install it, and it would be on different systems. So we would be able to turn off a grass component of it and leave and isolate the ring around the trees if that was so called for, and then turn that off too if we decided it wasn't necessary. And then there'd be no water usage charge from that meter.
And I see Ben waving his arms frantically. Ben?
I was just going to add quickly, thanks, Brent. We do install irrigation systems in the boulevard and for the trees. So there's tree drip loops, which are permanent, regular tree drip loop systems. And we install also spray head rotors. They're almost one of the most expensive things you can buy because of the wind at Royal Bay. We use these MP rotator heads. So you've got a really very expensive irrigation system that we build for you. And and also expensive controllers that are all Wi-Fi, top of the line, everything that Gord wants. So you can control it however you like.
Much appreciated, Ben, and I suppose good work to the staff for obtaining those benefits for the city. Still, it's a question of the city doing the maintenance and paying for the water on the grass irrigation. So, and I guess my final question here is Metchosin Road upgrades and Latoria Boulevard upgrades. Who pays for those?
Through the chair, if I may, Councillor Parkinson, Metchosin Road upgrades and Latoria Road upgrades will be undertaken by the developer. Metchosin Road split down the center, so the east side will be the beach when it goes, and the west side is Gablecraft. And Gablecraft has elected to proceed early on the intersection design for Latoria and Metchosin, and it's the intention that that intersection will form part of our future DCC considerations later on for the year.
But Metchosin Road and Latoria Boulevard won't be DCC programs?
That's correct. Latoria Boulevard will be, but Metchosin Road won't be in its factor.
Thank you. And I'm happy with the street lighting and the speed limit. I probably on Mayor Martin's side on the speed limit. Lowering it to 30 for the cul-de-sacs probably just means a bunch more signs, and there's enough signs in these developments already. So if we can limit it to just the 40 for the local roads, I'd be happier. And that's all I have to say. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Baxter, don't forget to unmute.
I am unmuted.
That guy, right? Thank you.
I'm hoping that Stuart gets a tally of 0 tonight. So first question I have is, have we given any thought to getting the boulevard irrigation from wells?
Brent?
Through the chair, no, we haven't, largely because of some of the subsurface contaminants that are on the lands and the amount of clearing that have to be necessary. Sometimes there can be a lot of fine silts, but I can say that we haven't done a test down there, at least that I'm aware of. But looking at our parks crew, no, we're not aware of any, Michael. Councillor Baxter.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say a word in favor of narrow right-of-ways. Every square meter of right-of-way the city pays to maintain whatever it's made of. We pay something to maintain it. So, and I think sticking with the old highways 20-meter right-of-way all the time, that or the 25 is, it's a very blunt instrument, and I'm glad to see that everybody's sizing the right-of-way to suit the purpose in this case. On the issue of speed limits, can anybody give me an estimate as to what the longest cul-de-sac will be in this development? It doesn't look like they'd be very long.
No, Michael, you are correct. They are quite short segments. And although I don't have a road length off the top of my head, but they're looking to be less than a couple hundred meters. Ben, if you're listening, could you add if you know?
Yes, Brent. There really are generally sort of in that neighborhood of 10 homes or less, 10 lots or less. There's generally just this modified grid layout. The only exception to that might be if you see the yellow curvilinear road in the bottom left-hand corner there, where it sort of wraps around. I guess it will terminate in the cul-de-sac. However, it would then have likely have some kind of strata or development at the end of it. So that would be the one example where there would be that would be a terminus in there after a long road.
Yeah, okay, I see that one. That would be long, yeah. I would support change to the bylaw that, well, actually, no, I wouldn't, because in a road that long, it's gonna be very difficult to get people to stick to 30K. They've got a ways to go, and at that speed, it seems to be interminable. And on the shorter cul-de-sacs, the only person who's going to get up to any decent speed on a short cul-de-sac is a guy, or person who enjoys fast acceleration, and they're probably going to do it whatever happens, as we see so often. So I'm not sure these speed limit changes do any good. The 30 anyway. I like the 40. Next question is, in Latoria North, we have these back lanes with garages emptying out onto the back lanes. And I've walked around there and looked at the parking issues, because I'm trying to understand why we hear so much about parking issues there. And if you think about the standard driveway and garage, there's a place to park cars in the garage. A lot of people don't use it, but it's there. And then there's at least one full space that'll take a truck in front of the garage, and sometimes there's more. Whereas if you go into Latoria North, as it is now, where we have these back lanes, people are having to park across sideways onto the garage to fit within their tiny little piece of driveway, and then in between those, there's nowhere to park a car. So the total amount of parking available to each house in that neighborhood is far below what we get in most neighborhoods. So my question coming out of that is, are we planning on requiring, or is the developer planning on creating back lanes with no driveways out onto the front street in any part of this development.
Brent?
Yes, lanes are part of this development. There is single-family homes that do front and have driveways to the front, but yes, lanes are part of this development. There is not intended to be any parking that's enabled on lanes. And the parking that you see where people are trying to squeeze into that couple of meters in between the lane edge and their garage is suggesting that they're not using their garage for parking. The intention of those garage spaces was to pull them so tight to the lane that they would force the residents to park in the garages and not do as you've assigned. However, a person may block their own garage access if they so choose, but there is not intended to be lane parking. They're just the minimum width necessary for all users of the road, including emergency vehicles.
Well, looking at the situation on the ground in Latoria North now, the idea of forcing them to park in their garages is not working. Some of them have removed the fence and are parking on the grass next to the garage in the back. I haven't seen, some of them have gravelled it, but some of them are parking on the grass. And others, I've even seen, full-size trucks parked sideways across the front of the garage. So I don't know, are we going to learn from that and give people more than just the parking in their garage in this new development? Or are we going to have the same problem again? Any comment?
Through the chair, Councillor Baxter, it's something that we've been working with bylaw on in terms of the adequate signage. This isn't a fire lane. The emergency services can approach all these homes that are back served lanes by the front of the property. So they're not formally a fire lane, however, they are an access way. We've been working on the proper signage, but ultimately the single family parking ratio as proposed by any parking consideration that's been insofar before council or as part of the zoning consideration for this land has not affected the single family dwelling units. So we are not proposing to reduce or increase the number of parking that's allocated per single family dwelling. I think what we've got going on there is the family buys it for the number of cars that they've got. Their son or daughter becomes 16 when they were only 14 when they moved in, and there's an extra car in the household. But we're not looking at changing the parking ratio at this present time.
And thank you, Brent. I think we're starting to stray a little bit because we should be talking about cross sections and sidewalks, but we're veering into laneway housing and stuff like that. So I just want to bring this back.
Well, I just want to point out that the cross sections do affect parking. So it's, you can't look at them in isolation. There's two different ones. So, but I think I've dealt with that. I think we've got a situation where the regulations aren't changing, but the actual situation is, and I'll be talking about that when we deal with the rezoning. In the meantime, there is a slight difference between the cross-section that is local road 18mm right-of-way proposed by Royal Bay and the actual cross-section drawn by Royal Bay, which is called Neighborhood Local Road. The difference is that well, I guess the one drawn by Royal Bay shows that they are doing parking bays on the plan view, but the cross section doesn't say that. Whereas every other cross section says boulevard / parking. So I thought that meant on the local road we weren't having any pullouts, but I think that's just the way it's denoted, not the way it's intended. Am I right there?
Brent?
You are correct.
Thank you. Pardon me while I get to my next page. I'm looking at the Commons Road, and the lanes are 3.5 meter lanes, which aren't generally considered large enough for shared roads with sharrows, but there's no other bike lane. So are we intending that the bikes would travel within the 3.5 along with the cars?
Through the chair, yes, the Commons Road is intended to be a very, very localized, high conflict zone that brings focus not only onto the users of the street, but the pedestrians and the business frontage. And the road is being designed in such a way that we can actually shut it down, put bollards in the roadway and have street festivals and event. And it's supposed to feel a bit, I'm struggling for the term, but it is supposed to have a fair bit of conflict and a bit of mingling and almost a winner's design, as Aaron said, where the cyclists are part of the roadway. It's very, very low volume, very, very low speed.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot to see there in the commercial area, and that helps people slow down. And I'm sorry to stray over the property line again, but it affects what's in the road right away. The buildings, the commercial buildings in that area, is there any intention that they would be built right up to the property line?
Through the chair, we're divesting from the road standard, and I'd be more than pleased to chat about it at another time. But yes, we're looking to have those buildings very, very tight to our high interaction with the pedestrian realm.
Okay, so the reason that interacts with the what's in the right of way is that normally fronting a commercial building, you would have a 3-meter sidewalk, which allows for, benches, that sort of thing, some bits of street furniture, and also it can also help you if the building wants a bit of spillover seating, which for a restaurant or a coffee shop, which is something that in the age of COVID, people are more and more interested in. So in that case, I would be proposing that we increase the 2-meter sidewalk on that road to 3 meters. And I'd like to make an amendment that on both sides of that cross section, we go for a 3-meter sidewalk as befitting a commercial street with properties fronting the road.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. So on the amendment, I've got 3 people that want to speak to that. Brent, did you want to start first? And we'll go to Ben Mycroft and then Matt Pike.
Definitely so. Thank you very much. And through the chair, one of the interesting ways with building designs is that you can end up getting increased sidewalk space by allowing the awnings to come over. And if they're permanent to the building, it has to form outside of the active right of way. That's something that we've talked to Ben about. And so while the developer about, so while the buildings are going to be tight to the perceived public realm, there should leave room for a bit of public spillover. I'd like to ask if Ben Mycroft would like to add something to this conversation. I think he's got a fair bit.
Yeah, Ben's hand is up. Ben?
Thank you. Yeah. Brent, this is what I was hoping you would show was this. This is in the agenda package, I believe, this plan view. So this plan view, we've really put quite a bit of thought and back and forth in with the city on this section here. So, to the point earlier, enabling the parallel parking just in the limited area where we've got the retail storefront, so we can actually make those retail units successful, especially in this sort of challenging retail time, as well as doing exactly what Councillor Baxter was noting with our proposal, which was to allow, we're sort of at odds with trying to keep buildings enclosed. From a planning perspective, we want them pretty tight, so you don't have this kind of undefined wide open space. It's nice to feel enclosed by the buildings, but at the same time allowing for that sidewalk area for things like street furniture and a cafe to spill out onto the sidewalk. So we've allowed for a 2-meter private sidewalk rather than a 3, but we've got the same idea in mind.
Oh, I see that ghosted in there now. I hadn't noticed that before. Okay.
Well, it wasn't in this is in the back. This is in the addendum section of the package. So they didn't show this in the earlier presentation.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And
Ben.
Matt wanted to say a few words too, Michael, Matt?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Baxter, really reinforcing what Ben had said. I think we all jumped into the same time wanting to point to this this section. The only thing perhaps for those engineering folk in the room, the difference between the angle parking and the parallel, we will be looking to try and maximise that angle parking where possible in front of the retail space. That road in particular, while not terribly steep, does have some areas which are a little bit steeper than others. And what we'll be looking to do in those areas where it is perhaps over 5% or to be determined, that's probably where we go the parallel parking, because angle parking doesn't go terribly well on those steep roads. So again, that'll be a detailed design requirement, but I think this pictorial shows it diagrammatically quite well.
Okay,
Thank you.
on that,
So Michael, are you satisfied with that explanation or are you willing to pull that to your amendment off the table or?
I'm quite happy to pull my amendment off the table.
Okay.
And I have one more question.
Perfect, go for it.
And it's in regards to the parallel parking in the commercial area. It just looks as if when you get out of your car, you have to walk across grass. And I would just draw everybody's attention to that, and that there should probably be some hard surface or stepping stones so that when somebody parks in the parallel area and they get out of their car, they don't have to get out onto the grass. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Mayor Martin?
Thank you. If you're ready to call the question, Chair, I'm just going to ask that you sever the speed out of that. I'd like to have 2 votes, please.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Sorry, can you, if you're going to call the vote, I'd like you to sever and further that this Colwood speed regulation bylaw number 1612 at the end of the motion. I'd like that severed off. I'd like to have 2 votes, please.
Okay, I was going to mention, because there was a lot of discussion about the 30, if someone even wanted to make an amendment, but if you would prefer to have it severed,
Yeah, I'm not supporting either, so if somebody else.
Okay, I'm happy to sever it. So the only question, or the only thing that I would highlight in addition to what was discussed tonight is, and although council hasn't had a discussion about the uses of Playfield Park yet, but we probably anticipate some partnership with the school district and Gablecraft in the development of that park, is that we really think about the parking along the park side of that strip, and perhaps consider maximizing the amount of parking that's adjacent to that park by perhaps eliminating the planted boulevard and having angled parking as an example. So I just throw that out there as something that we should be sensitive about. So with that, I will call the question on the recommendation on the floor minus the and further that this Colwood speed regulation bylaw 1612 be amended, et cetera, that will be a separate motion. So those that are opposed to the motion? Not seeing anybody opposed. And on the second part of the motion, as with the addition of the 30K in cul-de-sacs, Mayor Martin? Mayor Martin?
Sorry, no, sorry, I was just voting.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you had a,
No.
Councillor Baxter, did you have any discussion on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. The vote we're taking right now is just on the 30. The 40 is already decided.
The vote, actually, it's that whole section, which is the 50K an hour to 40K an hour, in addition to the amendment to the cul-de-sac portion to 30. So it's the whole shebang,
Okay.
unless somebody wants to make an amendment.
Then I will move an amendment that we remove the 30K from this part of the motion.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Okay, on the amendment to remove the 30K reference in cul-de-sacs. Discussion? Not seeing any discussion. Those that are opposed? Seeing none opposed. The amendment passes, so it reverts back to the original wording in the staff recommendation. Councillor Jansen. Councillor Jansen.
Sorry, just a late opposee.
Oh, okay, thank you. I will call the question then. Those that are opposed, Councillor Jansen. So the motion passes. Oh, and Mayor Martin opposes as well. So the motion still passes. Thank you. So we will move on to the next agenda item, which is item 5.2, Latoria Creek Stair Construction, a request for proposal. And Brent, I'll throw it over to you to introduce your team, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Logan. I appreciate that. So there's
Point of order?
What's your point of order?
Don't we have to actually now vote on the original because you separated it? Like we're now, should we be voted on the 40 now?
We just did.
Okay, I'm getting confused, sorry.
No problem, Doug.
Okay then, through the chair, am I okay to keep going?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. There's no PowerPoint tonight, but what we've got is our Public Works team here with Rob Boyle, Gord Bouvier, and John Russell here to answer any questions the council may have. What the intention of this report is to bring forward the RFP consideration for Latoria Creek Stairs. Gord, would you like to add anything? Or John, sorry, would you like to add anything?
No, I think based on our RFP, we had a really clear way forward in terms of which contractor suited us best. Really looking for the direction to explore using more renewable or longer lasting construction materials. And part of the issue we experienced with the RFP because of the poor timing with regard to COVID is that they weren't able to get information or quotes on materials that would extend the life of the stairs. And instead, they presented a lot of options that had wood, which is a good viable option. But we'd like to see some options to reduce life cycle costing. And so as a result, this report kind of summarizes a couple options we could do to either proceed with the wood and the basic construction or to look at some more diverse options to extend the life of the stairs.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Mayor Martin.
Thank you. I will make a motion that we do option 2, which is the contract Island Pro to construct the stairs as per the original submission, but then look at some opportunities. Oh, no, excuse me. No, I misspoke. I meant to move option 1, which was to utilize the full 250,000. And I do have one question once. Can I go ahead, Gordon?
Yep, go for it. Thanks, Mayor Martin.
So could staff please explain the life cycle? What are we expecting at the 218 amount that being built with wood? How long do we expect that would last? And how much longer if we spend the $31,000 and do find a product that allows an increase in the longevity of the stairs, how long would that be?
John?
Respectfully through the chair, Mayor Martin, with regard to the life cycle, we're looking at hopefully a 20 to 25 year life for these stairs. And so that is even with the wood considerations. We're hoping to push it out even further, but we're trying to be conservative and make sure that this is financially sound that way. Now, in terms of the history of looking at this, we really just want to, our past materials that we used in the original construction were custom. And so what we want to do is we want to utilize materials that are more standard, easier to come by, so that we can actively do repairs as they're needed and make this a more usable and friendly to maintain piece of infrastructure going forward.
So just as a quick follow-up question to that, Chair, if I may.
Yep.
So can I please clarify then, I'm not interested in us spending more than $218,000 for aesthetics. I'm interested in spending the additional $31,000 because I see the life cycle of these stairs increasing. Can we be assured if the motion that has just been passed, or excuse me, that I've moved, would that ensure that that is what's happening and that this isn't just an aesthetics choice?
No, this isn't about aesthetics. We're looking at this from primarily a fiscal perspective. We want to make sure that this is a long-lasting piece of infrastructure that's built well and built with readily available materials.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Mayor Martin. Councillor Baxter. Who's taking tally?
What is an ADA graspable handrail?
John, did you get that?
Oops, sorry,
You're muted.
Chair Logan. Hello. You're muted. Okay, through the chair. Sorry, we've been having mute issues on our end as well. No, we didn't. We weren't able to hear that. If Michael would, Councillor Baxter would mind repeating the question.
Yeah, Michael.
Oh, I just wanted to know what an ADA graspable handrail is.
Oops, there we go. Yeah, go for it.
It's basically just a kind of cylindrical aluminum handrail that would obviously we would not give slivers or anything like that. It would be easy for people to use and safe for people to use.
Excellent, excellent. And have we considered plastic wood for any of this?
And this is essentially what we're asking to explore, is to look at plastic wood, to look at aluminum, provided that it stays within the budget, to make these stairs even better and longer lasting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Chair Logan. I guess I had some kind of vision that these were going to be yanked out and then replaced with aluminum. Am I correct, Brent, or somebody, that looks like we're just incorporating aluminum bits and pieces kind of as and where needed?
Through the chair, Councillor Jensen, you're right. We certainly wanted to bring as much aluminum to bear as possible for the higher life expectancy of it. When we saw the values that came in for the wood product and started evaluating the life of the wood, we recognized that the budget wasn't there for the aluminum. But because we had a little bit of room, the 218 to the 250, that we could explore some component options. As Councillor Baxter's itemized, some of those components might be stair tread, but we may be able to actually look at some of the stringer sections being aluminum as well. That's the exploration, but the overall cost to do the aluminum stringers from top to bottom, we're outside of our scope and outside of our budget right now.
Does this require, I walked out there and had a good look at some of this stuff, and I mean, I see a lot of high quality treated lumber. I mean, is the foundation intact, or are we going to be digging up the posts as well? Or, I mean, how deep is this remediation going?
Thanks for the question. I'll actually ask that question to be tabled by Gord or John. Gentlemen?
Yeah, it would, some of the posts that are in the ground, they're going to be replaced so that we'll be able to remove posts with keeping the concrete and be able to replace posts. As we can't right now, it'd be a complete, we'd have to take the posts completely out from the top to the bottom, including the concrete, to replace them. So it is a complete rebuild with improvements with the construction for the posts and the concrete.
Sounds great, and I'll be looking to recycle some of that lumber for my deck when you're finished. One further tidbit, we're talking about stairs, but only a few meters away from the stairs is a small bridge that's really in the same condition. Where does that fit in?
Who would like to tackle that one?
So that is through the chair. Thank you for the question. The bridge has had a different level of study done to it. The bridges all throughout the entire system have been evaluated. That goes back, I actually looked at the report just the other day, I think to 2015. They are not in as bad of a condition. A lot of them were built of different mechanisms with different lengths of timbers and different size of members. And the reports have all come back relatively good. There is some minor repairs, but they just did not suffer from the degree of rot of being ground situated and on the ground situated like the staircase has.
Sounds great. Thanks. So you did have a look at that. And that's about it. Thanks, Chair Logan.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you. Supporter of this project. Let's get them done. I got to admit, I know, I forget who was it. I guess it was the mayor was concerned about spending money on aesthetics. I'm more saving money on aesthetics. I'm a wood guy. I prefer the wood look to the aluminum look. And I guess I question the practice of saying we had a budget for X, well, we got a price that was less than that, so let's spend the rest of the budget because we can find useful things to do with it. I don't think that's a path I personally think the city should be going down. I have to believe that the proposal that went out called for the work that was needed and was believed had to be done. So I think I'm going to support option 2, not option 1.
Thank you. Mayor Martin?
Thank you. Just as a quick, oh, sorry, I got to plug my iPad in. Very quickly, I'm just wondering, no matter what happens, option 1, option 2, whichever passes, and it comes through council and it approves council, can you tell me what the timelines would be when anticipating the work to start, and how long would these stairs be closed for the general public, and when would we expect them to open?
Good question. Brent?
Thank you very much. And through the chair, Mayor Martin, that was a really aggressive part of the RFP process, as we wanted minimum disturbance to the lands, a safe route in, sensitivity to the environmental constraints that were around, as well as an open schedule for works. This will significantly affect the operation of the trail for the construction period. They'll be staging it on Latoria, using a gator to bring material in. And to do that, they will need to shut down these sections of trails. That's part of the management cycle, and we do expect it to take most of, or at least half of July, most of August, but be open in time for September.
Okay. Great, thank you. So I will call the question. There is a motion on the floor, and that is option 1. So those that are opposed to the motion, call the question. Okay, opposed, we have 2 opposed, Councillor Kobayashi and Councillor Parkinson. So the motion passes. All right, thank you very much. So we will move on to item 5.3, Latoria South Parks terms of reference. And I'd like to invite the Honorable Dennis Carlson, our planner, to introduce the item. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just get loaded up here. All right, so can you hear me all right?
Can, yes, thank you.
Okay, so the presentation tonight, the staff report is in response to a council motion on May 11th regarding the rezoning application for Latoria South. That included a condition that a staff report be provided to council for their consideration prior to the public hearing, and also that the development agreement associated with this application include a condition that the developer will provide a park plan showing pathway connections and their accessibility per the user-friendly trail toolkit to other local parks and trails to the satisfaction of the city. So as a bit of a context, this is the slide that you have up in front of you here is the current Royal Bay plan, and you can see the area that's on
Sorry,
your
Dennis, sorry to interrupt, Dennis, we don't see our power.
You can't?
No.
Okay. My apologies. Just give me a second here.
sorry, through the chair, Dennis is having a little bit of internet issues right now, and sorry for the break.
No problem.
My apologies. Just give me a see if I can can you hear me at all?
We can hear you perfectly, Dennis. Yep.
But you can't, okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Dennis, I could bring it up if you'd like. Would you like me to do that?
Well, what's happening is I don't have a very strong internet connection tonight. So my apologies if I drop out here.
Okay, I can bring it up on the slide on the screen,
Okay.
and then you can tell me to move along when you're ready,
All right.
okay?
That would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
I referred to it as the Coronation Street problem out in Sydney. Everybody's got the kettle on. So Amanda, could you, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. So thank you. So this is a current Royal Bay plan. As you can see, it shows the proposed park area running essentially parallel to Latoya Creek Park with trails connections from the park and also to the school, which is the area highlighted in blue, which is this area right in here. So the majority of Quarry Park was identified as a neighborhood park, and the neighborhood park is identified as a managed park that provides opportunity for a range of active and passive activities. So this plan did show, connections through Latoya South, as we now call it, to the school, onto the commons, which is this area here, and then connecting through to the Latoya North through the park system that's currently under construction. Next slide, please, Amanda. The proposed plan for Latoya South reconfigures the park area somewhat based on the proposed location of the school. In addition, adds about approximately 1.2 hectares to Latoya Creek Park, which is this area that's identified in slightly darker color here. There's still the pathway connections to Latoya Creek Park and also to the rest of the Quarry neighborhood and through the commons, largely through the street connection systems and the path connection systems that were shown to you earlier as part of the street classification. In addition, and through the commons, which is this area in here, they're proposing some parkettes and also some public plazas in and around through this development. Next screen, please, Amanda. It's important to note that the amount of park space is largely unchanged. The Royal Bay plan, the estimate for Latoya South was approximately 7 hectares. They are proposing essentially the same amount of park space, both for neighborhood natural park and also for neighborhood park. Next slide, please, Amanda. So the park's terms of reference, which we've highlighted here, the sort of the major components, will also include major elements that will be the foundation of the parks plan that will be developed for Latoya South. As I mentioned earlier, it will be applying the user-friendly trail toolkit, and also very important is estimating the cost of annual maintenance. I should point out that this process is very much paralleled after the process that we use for Latoya North, and has been, to date, has been a very successful process. Based on the terms of reference that are adopted by council, a more detailed park concept will be forwarded to council for consideration. And we would expect this would happen sometime after the adoption of the bylaws regarding this application. Okay, Amanda, next. So finally, the staff recommendation is that the park's terms of reference, as appended to the staff report, be adopted or recommended for adoption by council. and that the terms of reference also be included as part of that. The other important part of the staff recommendation, and this is largely in response to a request from the applicant, is that there be a staff report back to council to consider applying a portion of the amenity contributions that would be generated by the development in Latoria South towards specific parks improvements in Latoria South. So the staff are suggesting that this is something that would come back to council at a later date with recommendations as to how this could happen should council wish. That essentially includes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Dennis. Councillor Kobayashi. Guess what?
Just to get the conversation going, sorry about that. I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Doug. So we have a motion on the floor. On the motion, Councillor Baxter. Your tally's going up, Michael.
Yep, that's two. Out of only three that were needed. That staff provide a report to council regarding the allocation of contributions to the Community Amenity Fund towards specific park improvements in Latoria South. I understand that we will get that report likely after the rezoning is done. So my question is then, well, the developer won't know what contributions we might be making until after the rezoning is already done. Is that correct?
Yes, through the chair, for the time being, the process here will be the same as we do for other developments, where they will, the developer will make contributions based on the amounts specified in the zoning bylaw, and that those amounts will go into the city's community amenity fund until such time as council directs otherwise.
Okay. Thank you. And I have a question about the change in the plans, and it's simply a question at this point. The old plan, which is Appendix 2 in the report, appears to show a green corridor right through the entire development from Latoria Creek Park to Maurice Pond, with just a bit of a gap maybe at the commons. This green corridor appears to have been eliminated, but I mean, we were told at the time of the original plan was prepared that this was a wildlife corridor, which ensured healthier ecosystems because wildlife could travel up and down the corridor. Is that thinking changed now?
Through the chair, two things to consider here. One is that the intent of the corridor in terms of providing a connection through to Latoria North is still being met by the pathways and cycling systems that was shown to you earlier tonight. In terms of the wildlife corridor, that is not something we've contemplated. I would have to say this is unlikely to be a corridor that you see wildlife traveling through. They would most likely like to stick to the established areas like Latoria Creek Park. But as I said, this is not something we've investigated.
Yeah.
I do have Brent and Ben that wish to speak probably to that point, Michael.
Thank you.
Go to Brent first.
Dennis has essentially summed it up that we did move away from that central spine as being a greenway, reckoning that we could meet the same objectives with the multi-use intent running right through the spine and then planting it as almost a pathway corridor with trees and a bit of grass. But however, I'd like to see what Ben would like to add as well, if I may.
Certainly, Ben.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Yes, if I could speak to that, the previous plan, the 2014 Royal Bay Area Plan, did have the wildlife corridor concept, and that's something that we're in the process of realizing currently in Latoria North, connecting Murray's Pond through, the drainage channel through Meadow Park, and then down essentially to Latoria Boulevard. But what we've done in Latoria South, instead of having the comment in the area plan was that it was a wildlife corridor, but if you look and you sort of zoom in on the plan, you'll see it's really kind of a chopped up little slivers of parkland at the end of blocks, interrupted by roadways. So it wasn't on the south side, it was never a linear park system. And instead, the focus that we've shifted things to actually ground to truthing the development boundary. So we went through quite a process on establishing where there were mature forest areas adjacent to Latoria Creek Park that we actually owned, but in the previous area plan were designated as residential development land. And now we're adding, I think Dan Wong's got the stat, but it's, I believe, 1.2 hectares of land. So over a couple areas of mature forest land we're adding, I think is more important than the previous concept. And then the other thing that we're doing is essentially renewing the really old concept of the perimeter pathway system. And so we've focused some of the park areas to creating what we're calling the Old Mechosen Trail. And that's sort of utilizing that old section of asphalt roadway from the Old Mechosen roadway for the first couple hundred meters, and then carrying on a perimeter pathway connecting into Latoria Creek Park, connecting up in through the neighborhood connectors to the Quarry Park, and then through our pedestrian and cycling connectivity through the entire development. So yes, the concept definitely has shifted, but we think that there's a more refined and a useful framework in place.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Mayor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to the Quarry Park, the active Quarry Park, and I guess this would be more of a question to staff than anybody else. Have we engaged West Shore Park and Rec? And I'll just preface this with a bit of the reason I'm asking the question. The second field at Royal Bay Secondary, the AstroTurf field, was actually the city's, and we worked in conjunction with West Shore Park and Rec to actually be able to build that field. This seems like we're looking at using this Quarry Park as some sort of field of some sort. And I'm just wondering if we've begun to engage West Shore Park and Rec to make sure we understand which resources are actually needed within our community.
Yeah, Brent.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Mayor Martin. So the city is engaging in this year Parks Master Plan terms of reference. Those results will be shared with council through the administration team and staff, and that'll help form part of the consideration for what goes in that space. In terms of the parks terms of reference that you're looking in front of us, the staff intent in working with Gablecraft was to first figure out the sort of size and space we needed, and then to essentially get the sand base and get it seeded to allow complete flexibility for council when working with whatever partners it chose to in actualizing that space. So to directly answer your question, no, we have not reached out to Parks, West Shore Parks Terms of Rec. We were waiting for our own RFP and our terms of reference, or our master plan parks objectives to come forward to review that with council, and then to unfold that park plan over the course of time.
Okay. Sorry, Mayor Martin, our Director of Long Range Planning has his hand up as well. And then, so Ian Forhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Brent covered what I intended to say, and I just wanted to add that our consulting team with staff are going to be making an update presentation to Committee of the Whole on July 6th regarding the progress to date on the Parks Master Plan process.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Martin.
So just as a follow-up to that, I guess a bit of my concern is at the West Shore Park and Rec Board, they have a 5-year plan of building out facilities. And so I would hate for this not to even be sitting on the list of places that they need to start considering. And so, I would suggest before we begin to invest into this park, and I know we're not at that point yet, I think it becomes critical that we engage with that partner, because not only are we going to be able to offset some of the costs, but we'll also be actually building a facility that we've identified through Parks and Recreation. And I'm done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Earl, did you have a few comments?
Thank you, Chair Logan. And Mayor Martin, absolutely, staff would intend to engage West Shore Parks and Rec in the development and programming of this space. We will use the information gathered through our Parks and Rec master planning process this summer, and then we would sit down with stakeholders like West Shore Parks and Rec and talk about how we move forward long in advance of any pre-planning for this site or any pre-construction consideration. So absolutely, we will engage with that partner.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parkinson?
Thank you, Chair Logan. Yeah, this is good. Once again, I marvel at the number of steps the developers have to take on this this process. I guess it's a major project, and good for them for working through it very professionally, I believe, and for our staff for working on it. I'll support the motion. Doesn't mean though when the third part of the staff provide a report to council regarding the allocation of contributions of the community amenity fund towards specific parks improvements in Latoria South, doesn't mean I'm going to be necessarily taking the money to assist them with that. We heard in the roads presentation how they were paying for everything and anything to do with the roads. Probably that's a good starting point on the parks as well, and we'll see what the discussion entails when it comes back. But I'll support the motion tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen?
Much has already been said. There was a little bit of mention there for the Parks Master Plan. That was one of my concerns. Is there congruity between this and the forthcoming Parks Master Plan? I'd hate to see the need for some duplication. Maybe someone can comment.
Hi, Mr. Chair.
Ian, go for it.
Thanks. Yes, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is intended to provide direction across the city with in terms of policy and overall guidelines that would instruct future programming decisions. It's also intended to have a series of pre-policy steps in place such that individual park plans could be easily developed after the Parks Master Plan is in place. So this would be one of the parks that, once the Parks and Recs Master Plan is in place, is then treated to have its own specific plan that follows the guidance of the master plan.
Thank you. I have to say I'm quite impressed with this report, and a lot of good things have popped out to me, including wayfinding strategy and adherence to the guide to user-friendly trails and good stuff like that. I think Mayor Martin highlighted the active Quarry Park, and I too, I just want to make sure that we have a solid plan prior to any work being done on the site. I think we need to know what we want to build there and maximize any efficiencies through site prep that we can to realize kind of what our vision is. So my fear is we're going to plant a grass field there, and then we're going to make up our minds and say, you know what, we're going to put artificial turf in. And when really we could do a lot of that stuff up front. And there's lots of great examples out there. I shared with the CAO Minoru Field in Richmond, which is a fantastic multi-purpose area with lots of fields, track, all-weather ball diamond stuff. We really have an opportunity here to maximize the facilities in concert with School District 62, with a spin-off effect of supporting the commons area, which I think is really important. So, I just want to make sure we have a plan before we undertake any improvements in the active park. But Brent, I know you have your hand up.
Thank you very much, Councillor Logan. As the chair, I'll address my response to what we've asked for in the terms of reference that the land be geotechnically stable for the use intended. And the benefit that I wish to add is that none of this is going to happen figuratively tomorrow. It's going to take several years to get back there, which will allow enough opportunity for not only council to consider the plan that Ian has spoken about, but for the consultation to come together and to bring about what geotechnically suitable means. It's definitely a different, lighter surface to have grass than it may be to have artificial, but it also is a different surface that might be necessary for some court type play structures. And so those opportunities will be there and will be presented with council, and council will be part of that as the years go on.
Great. Thank you, Brent. Seeing no further hands, I will call the question on the motion that's on the floor. Those that are opposed? Seeing none opposed, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Our next meeting, the Committee of the Whole, is scheduled for Monday, July the 6th. It's been a slice, and I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Anybody? Moved by Councillor Jansen. All those opposed? Not opposed. We're done. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night, all.